The Crucible Station combat dome floated at the far edge of known space, a glittering scar of glass and metal suspended in the black. From the outside, it looked like a jewel. From the inside, it was a maw. The arena's walls were transparent, panels reinforced with latticework steel, giving every spectator a view of the void beyond. The only sound was the low thrum of the station's power core and the hum of translation fields, a sound that had a way of making the silence deeper. Above the fighting floor, massive lamps cast hard white beams that sliced down through the haze of recycled air. Rows upon rows of alien faces pressed against the viewing rails, each species with its own manner of showing anticipation. Vakari mandibles clicked like steel beetles. Ilthran tendrils writhed in slow spirals. The Dravik simply grinned. They had gathered for a duel. A tall, armor-plated figure stepped into the center circle and slammed a clawed fist against the challenge post. The sound rang out like a hammer hitting an anvil. Commander Varric, Dravik blood champion, 600. Pounds of muscle wrapped in scale-hardened hide, his shoulders studded with horn-like spurs. His eyes, yellow and slit-pupilled, scanned the audience before settling on the section where the human recruits stood. "I will face one of you," he growled, the station's translators deepening his voice into a rumble that vibrated in the bones. "Or is your kind only brave when hiding behind ships?" A ripple of laughter passed through the alien crowd, cruel and sharp. A Vakari recruit leaned toward his neighbor. "They'll send no one," he clicked. "Too fragile, too breakable." Then movement. From the shadowed arch at the edge of the combat floor, a single figure stepped forward. He was lean, his stance easy but unhurried. His boots made no sound against the steel. His hands were bare. No gauntlets, no gloves, just calloused skin and faint scars. His uniform was unadorned except for a single strip of faded fabric tied around his right wrist. Sergeant Cole Marston, human. No one cheered, no one jeered. The silence that followed his entrance was stranger than either. He stopped 10 paces from Varric, eyes scanning the arena like he was studying a room rather than walking into a fight to the death. The lights glinted off the faint stubble on his jaw. Varric's grin widened, exposing teeth meant to tear through armor. "You?" Cole tilted his head slightly as though the question didn't need answering. The Vakari drill sergeant, Threx, muttered from the sidelines, his mandibles clicking in disbelief. "He's dead in under a minute." Cole's eyes never left the Dravik. "All right," he said finally, his voice steady, carrying just enough to reach the top rows. "But you're walking out smarter than you came in." The words didn't provoke the laugh Varric might have expected. They landed differently, like a blade laid on the table between them. The duel's terms were simple: no weapons. The Dravik took this as a cosmic joke. To them, the human body was a weapon, but one made of soft tissue, brittle bone, and desperation. Against the plated hide and bone-reinforced muscle of a Dravik, it might as well have been paper. The announcer's voice rang out, mechanical and cold. "Combatants, prepare!" Varric rolled his shoulders, each movement accompanied by the sound of plates grinding against one another. His claws flexed, catching the light in lethal arcs. Cole crouched briefly, running a hand across the steel floor, as though testing it. The motion wasn't wasted. In that moment, he noted the faint slope, the grip under his boots, the way sound carried in the dome. Around them, the crowd pressed closer to the transparent rails. The air smelled faintly of hot metal and ozone. Above the arena, the great signal horn sat dormant, waiting for the signal to release its scream. Varric took a step forward. The floor groaned under his weight. He leaned close enough that Cole could smell the iron tang of his breath. "I will make this quick," he rumbled. Cole didn't step back. His gaze was level, unreadable. Somewhere high above, a green light flickered. The horn drew in breath, and as its piercing note ripped through the air, time seemed to hold still. Every eye in the dome locked on the moment the galaxy's largest predator met Earth's smallest challenger. Horn's echo still vibrated in the air when the crowd erupted into overlapping languages, a layered chaos of growls, hisses, and the metallic clack of Vakari mandibles. Above it all, the towering scoreboard lit up with alien runes, translating. Into the human recruits' headsets, wager open. On Crucible Station, a duel wasn't just a fight. It was a spectacle, an economy. Credits, rations, even entire shifts of labor were about to be gambled on the outcome. Holographic panels bloomed in midair as spectators committed their bets. From the way they glowed green on Varric's side and barely flickered for Cole, the odds were insulting. Somewhere in the upper gallery, a Ilthrin spectator coiled its tendrils together and hissed, "One human bone for every Dravik strike." Nearby, two Vakari cadets exchanged a bet over whether Cole's skull would crack before his ribs. Down on the arena floor, Cole didn't seem to hear any of it. His eyes tracked Varric's breathing, the way his shoulders lifted and fell. The Dravik wasn't breathing heavily yet, but the rhythm was deep, controlled, experienced, dangerous. A shadow fell over Cole as Varric stepped closer, his frame blotting out the overhead lights. Even standing still, the alien radiated force, every inch of his armor-plated hide a testament to the hundreds of bouts he'd walked away from. "You'll run," Varric rumbled, voice pitched low enough that the translation field almost missed it. "And I'll hunt you down until you trip." Cole's answer came without heat. "We'll see." The simplicity of it seemed to irritate Varric more than any insult could have. From the viewing pit, Drill Sergeant Threx muttered to a fellow, "Vakari. No human has lasted more than 3 moves against a Dravik challenger. This one looks like he'll barely last 2. But Cole wasn't posturing like most challengers. He wasn't bouncing on his feet or rolling his shoulders. He just stood there letting Varric measure him, the way an architect measures a building, before deciding where to take it apart. A low chime sounded. The voice of the announcer, cool, metallic, cut through the noise. "Combatants. Final check." Varric flexed his claws, the sound like twin blades sliding from their sheaths. Cole flexed his fingers, the movement quiet, almost lazy. High above, the crowd's noise swelled, feeding on itself, becoming a living creature pressing down on the fighters. From this close, Cole could hear the deep hum of Varric's breathing. Apparatus, the faint crackle of his hide under the heat of the lamps. He could even see the microfractures along one of the alien's horn tips, evidence of an old break. Details, patterns, openings. Cole's mind filed them away not for victory, but for the lesson. The announcer's tone sharpened. "Combatants. Ready? Duel begins on horn!" The green signal light ignited above the arena. The air seemed to thicken as all movement in the crowd slowed, as if the station itself was holding its breath. Varric crouched slightly, his muscles coiling like a spring wound to breaking. Every instinct screamed that he was about to explode. Forward the moment the horn sounded. Cole bent his knees a fraction, barely perceptible, shifting his weight onto the balls of his feet. It was a stance that said, "I am not prey." The moment stretched. Someone in the gallery dropped a cup, and the clang seemed impossibly loud. Cole's heartbeat slowed instead of speeding up. He could feel the space between himself and Varric as a tangible thing, a thin strip of air that in a few seconds would become the most dangerous ground in the galaxy. The crowd's noise flattened into a single, hungry silence. The horn screamed. Varric moved first, a flash of claws, and scaled. Muscle that made the overhead lights blur. His first step hit the floor so hard the vibration shuddered through Cole's boots. And yet, Cole didn't move immediately. His eyes stayed locked on the Dravik's center mass, watching the way his left shoulder dipped just before his right arm swung, a telltale sign of his favored opening strike. Cole's lips twitched, not into a smile, but into something that might have been the ghost of one. The lesson was about to begin. The horn's scream still clawed at the air when Varric became motion. To the untrained eye, it wasn't a run. It was an avalanche. The steel floor quaked under his charge, each step punching sound into the dome's bones. His claws tore glittering, sparks from the metal as his arms swung wide, ready to scythe anything in his path. The crowd roared as one, a beast made of 100 species, their voices folding into an animal hunger. Some shouted for blood, others for speed, but no one expected the human to still be standing in the next breath. Varric's eyes narrowed into golden slits. The first strike was meant to end it. His right claw swept in a horizontal arc, every muscle behind it aimed cleanly for the fragile neck of his prey. Cole moved, not with a desperate duck or a backward jump, but with a sidestep so tight and smooth it looked like Varric had swung through a ghost. The claw sliced through empty air, close enough that Cole felt the wind of it tug at the fabric on his collar. Gasps burst from the crowd. Varric's momentum carried him past where Cole had been. But instead of stumbling, the Dravik rolled into his next attack, pivoting on one foot with an agility that belied his size. The second strike came low, sweeping for Cole's legs. Cole bent his knees and stepped into the arc, letting the claw whistle past just behind his calves. His boot heel scraped across the floor in a controlled slide. From the sideline, Sergeant Threx's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "He's reading him." Cole's eyes stayed locked on Varric's chest, ignoring the claws entirely. "You didn't watch the weapon. You watched the machine driving it." Varric's breathing had quickened, just enough to tell Cole he wasn't completely relaxed anymore. The human waited for the next move, weight perfectly balanced, arms loose at his sides. Varric snarled and lunged again, this time with both claws forward, the classic Dravik crusher technique. Against any other opponent, it was inescapable, a double arc of death. Cole took a single step to his right just outside the arc's convergence point, and rotated his body so his shoulder brushed past Varric's. In that heartbeat, Cole's hand tapped the Dravik's elbow joint, a movement so quick it was lost to most of the audience. But Varric felt it. His right arm's follow-through faltered for a fraction of a second. That hesitation, invisible to most eyes, was Cole's confirmation. Every joint, every limb could be disrupted. By now, the noise in the dome had shifted. The jeers had faded into murmurs, and some spectators leaned forward, eyes tracking the strange surgical dance on the floor. This wasn't a desperate prey trying to escape a predator. It was something else. Varric's claws struck again. This time faster, wilder, the edges blurring in the lights. Cole slipped between them, each motion minimal, almost lazy, like a man strolling through rain without getting wet. One particularly vicious strike scraped the floor inches from Cole's boots, sending a spray of sparks across the dome. They hissed and died against the transparent barrier, briefly illuminating the stunned faces of the front row. Varric growled, his voice a low thunder. "Stand and fight, human!" Cole's eyes flicked to his. "I am." It wasn't bravado. It was truth. Another charge came, this time with Varric's entire body weight behind it, claws raised high for a killing blow. The crowd leaned forward, sensing the end. Cole stepped back. Only one step, but it made Varric overextend by inches. Cole's left hand brushed the Dravik's forearm, his right pressed lightly into the plated chest, and with the smallest turn of his hips, Varric's swing carved empty air once again. The Dravik stumbled forward a half step before regaining balance, his claws lowered now, his breathing heavier. And somewhere in the third tier of seats, a Vakari cadet whispered the words no one thought they'd hear. "He's teaching him." The crowd didn't cheer this time. They were too busy watching. Cole rolled his shoulders once, settling back into his stance, as if he'd just finished stretching rather than dodging death. The fight wasn't about to end. It was about to begin. The air in the dome was electric, thick with anticipation and disbelief. Varek's heavy breaths billowed out in short, ragged bursts, his massive form tense like a coiled predator. But Cole, calm, collected, held his ground with the quiet confidence of a man who knew something the galaxy didn't. Around them, the crowd murmured. Some spoke in hushed tones, others whispered theories. The idea that a single human, unarmed and outmatched, could outmaneuver a battle-hardened Dravik was almost heresy. Varek's claws flexed, glinting coldly under the arena's harsh lights. He lunged again, faster this time, eyes blazing with fury. The attack was a wild, sweeping strike designed to crush, to intimidate, to end. But Cole didn't dodge. Instead, he stepped forward, closing the distance. The crowd gasped. Varek's claws sliced past, missing by mere inches as Cole's body slipped through the gaps like water. The human's movements were neither frantic nor hesitant. They were precise, fluid, almost like a dance choreographed by instinct and sharpened by relentless training. Cole's foot caught Varek's advancing leg with a subtle sweep, causing the Dravik to stagger, balance faltering. The unexpected counter stunned the audience into silence. The Vakari drill sergeant Threx hissed sharply, his mandibles clicking together in rapid succession. By the stars! He's using their own momentum against them. Cole didn't pause. His hands moved, not with brute force, but with surgical precision. One hand pressed against the Dravik's elbow joint, twisting just enough to unsettle the armored limb. The other brushed a vulnerable spot beneath the shoulder plate, a pressure point barely noticeable to the untrained eye. Varek roared, muscles tensing as pain radiated through his arm. He swung wildly, claws scraping steel, sparks flying from the arena floor. But Cole was already gone, slipping back with a fluid step, keeping out of reach, letting the Dravik's fury carry him forward. The crowd leaned in. The atmosphere charged. With awe and disbelief. "This isn't a fight," a Ylthrin whispered. "It's a lesson." Cole's eyes never left Varek's. His breathing was steady, controlled. He wasn't trying to win with brute strength or flashy moves. He was showing the Dravik and everyone watching that victory wasn't just about muscle and weaponry. It was about understanding. Varek snarled, regrouping. His movements became sharper, less predictable. He no longer relied solely on his powerful strikes, but began feinting, shifting weight, testing Cole's reactions. But Cole was always one step ahead. Every feint was met with a calm assessment. Every charge met with a graceful evasion or a subtle counter. The human's style was unlike anything seen before, a blend of patience, precision, and unshakable focus. Above the arena, the scoreboard flickered, the crowd's bets shifting wildly. As confidence in the Dravik's dominance wavered, Varek's breathing grew ragged. The muscles along his neck twitched under the strain. He was fighting not just a human, but a force of nature, relentless in its calm. In a sudden, fluid motion, Cole closed the distance again, gripping Varek's forearm and twisting with just enough force to send the Dravik sprawling to one knee. A collective gasp rippled through the spectators. Varek's eyes burned with a mixture of shock and grudging respect. He rose slowly, shaking off the pain, claws flexing but no longer swinging recklessly. Cole stood poised, ready, not to finish the fight, but to teach. The lights dimmed slightly as a hush fell over the arena. The crowd waited, breath held tight. In that silence, a single thought echoed through the station. The human isn't just fighting, he's rewriting the rules. The heavy silence in the dome shattered as Varek's massive form straightened, eyes blazing with renewed fury. The Dravik's pride had been bruised, his advantage chipped away by a human who fought like no creature in known space. But pride was a dangerous thing. Varek lunged forward, claws raised like twin scythes cutting through the thick recycled air. The ground beneath him trembled with the sheer force of his charge. This was no longer a simple duel. It was a battle of wills, a war between raw strength and meticulous strategy. Cole didn't flinch. Instead, He danced on the edge of the strike's reach, his feet barely whispering on the steel floor. His eyes flicked to Varric's shoulders, reading the tension in the muscles, anticipating the arc of his claws before they could even begin their descent. The Dravic's claws slashed down, sparking off the floor inches from Cole's side. With a swift pivot, Cole slipped inside the strike, his palm pressing hard against Varric's chest plate. The metal groaned under the unexpected pressure, a sound alien and sharp. Using the momentum, Cole twisted Varric's arm, sending a shockwave through the armored limb. The Dravic staggered, gritting his teeth against the pain, claws scraping the arena as he struggled to regain balance. Around the dome, the crowd leaned. Forward, breaths held in collective suspense. Some whispered in disbelief. Others erupted in cheers for the underdog who refused to bow. Cole's eyes burned with quiet intensity as he locked gaze with Varric. "This isn't about brute force," he said, voice steady and calm, carrying across the arena despite the roar of the crowd. "It's about knowing when to strike, and when to wait." Varric growled, fury twisting his face, but he hesitated. The Dravic was learning, adapting, forced to rethink every move, every instinct honed over decades of combat. This was no ordinary fight. It was a lesson writ large across the combat floor, a message encoded in every step, every breath. The humans. Stance shifted, muscles coiling like a spring. Suddenly, Cole exploded into motion, a blur of calculated strikes and evasions, each one precise enough to unsettle the towering Dravic. Varric swung wildly, desperation creeping into his attacks. His claws scraped against Cole's side, sharp, enough to draw blood, but the human's resolve never wavered. The arena lights flickered, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts around the fighters. The crowd gasped as Cole sidestepped a lethal blow and delivered a low sweep that knocked Varric off balance. The Dravic crashed to one knee, chest heaving, but the fight was far from over. Varric's eyes gleamed with fierce respect as he rose, muscles trembling but unbroken. He extended a clawed hand, a silent gesture that was both surrender and challenge. Cole met the gesture, gripping Varric's arm firmly. The dome erupted into cheers, a cacophony of sound that echoed across the station. In that moment, the true lesson was clear. Strength alone did not guarantee victory. It was the mind, the will, the ability to learn and adapt that defined the ultimate fighter. As the lights dimmed and the crowd began to disperse, whispers filled the air. The human taught the Dravic humility. The galaxy underestimated them. And now, the lesson has just begun. The arena lights dimmed, leaving behind the hum of scattered conversations and the low buzz of excited speculation. Cole stood alone in the center of the combat floor, chest rising and falling steadily, sweat glistening beneath the harsh lights. Around him, the crowd slowly dispersed, but the impact of the duel lingered like a storm cloud on the horizon. Above the dome, hollow screens flashed news bulletins from Crucible Station to every corner of human and alien space. The headline scrolling across thousands of channels was unmistakable. Human cadet defies expectations. Best's Dravic champion in duel of honor. In the corridors behind the arena, whispers turned to heated debates. Ambassadors from dozens of species convened, voices tinged with disbelief and grudging respect. The Vakari drill sergeant, Threx, stood apart, eyes narrowed as he spoke quietly to a human officer. He did more than win. He shattered centuries of assumptions. The officer nodded slowly. The galaxy believed humans were reckless. Now they know we are calculated, relentless. Meanwhile, Varric sat in a secluded chamber, the pain in his arm throbbing beneath the armored plates. His gaze was distant, reflecting on the lesson etched deep into his bones. The Dravic was a warrior bred to dominate. Losing was a bitter medicine, but losing to a human? It awakened a respect that was hard to swallow, yet impossible to ignore. Across the galaxy, word spread like wildfire. Humans were no longer the underestimated species lurking on the fringe. They were a force, intelligent, adaptable, and fierce in ways that transcended brute strength. Back on Crucible Station, Cole walked through the hallways lined with watchers and whispers. Some looked with awe, others with cautious calculation. But all knew one truth. The balance of power was shifting. In the mess hall, a group of cadets huddled around a flickering holo, replaying the duel's highlights. "Did you see how he didn't just fight? He taught?" one whispered. Another nodded. That's the human way. Not just survival, but dominance through understanding. But the lesson was not without cost. The higher echelons of the Galactic Council began to stir. Some feared what human tenacity might mean for fragile alliances and age-old rivalries. Others saw opportunity, a chance to ally with a species that could change the course of history. The duel was no longer just about a fight. It was a spark, igniting a galaxy-wide reconsideration of humanity's place among the stars. As night fell over Crucible Station, Cole stood looking out at the star-streaked void. The hum of the station's engines vibrated through the deck beneath his feet. In that vast silence, he felt the weight of what had just happened. It wasn't just a victory, it was a message. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and that was a mistake it would never repeat. The echoes of the duel's thunder still rippled through Crucible Station when the unexpected happened. The Galactic Council called an emergency summit, a gathering of power, suspicion, and uneasy curiosity. Leaders from a dozen species cloaked in elaborate uniforms and ancient customs crowded into the towering chamber. The air buzzed with unspoken tension. Whispers circled. Is humanity a threat, or the galaxy's new hope? Cole stood in the gallery above, watching as delegates argued heatedly over human tactics, strength, and the implications of that single fight. Outside the chamber, a different storm brewed. The Dravik, still nursing bruises both physical and prideful, met with Varric and his closest advisors. "We cannot allow one human to redefine combat," growled a massive Dravik general, claws tapping rhythmically. On the table, Varric's eyes flashed. "Then we learn from him or we fall behind. I saw his moves, his mind. It's not just muscle, it's strategy, patience." "But it's human strategy," spat another. "Unpredictable, dangerous." Meanwhile, Cole trained harder, pushing limits in the sprawling training halls of Crucible. His moves were no longer just his own. Cadets watched and learned, mimicking the fluid, precise style that had confounded Varric. Human fighters multiplied like wildfire, each one a living testament to the lesson that strength alone could never win. Tensions mounted beyond Crucible. Smaller skirmishes flared in border systems as alien factions tested their strength against human-led units. Every encounter ended the same. Humans adapted, learned, and prevailed. Not through sheer power, but through cunning, endurance, and unity. The galaxy's underestimation of humanity became its greatest weakness. Back in Crucible's mess hall, whispers grew louder. A young Ilthran officer leaned in, voice low but charged with excitement. "It's not just a fight anymore. It's a movement. The human method is changing everything." A Vakari cadet nodded. "And it's unstoppable." But with every victory, the stakes rose. Enemies adapted too, their own tactics growing more ruthless, more cunning. The galaxy was changing, faster than anyone expected. Cole felt it too. The lesson had only just begun. Looking out over the station's endless sprawl, Cole knew this was bigger than a single fight, bigger than Crucible or even humanity. This was a new era, one where lessons were written in blood and steel, where survival demanded more than muscle, where the human spirit ignited the galaxy's future. The galaxy learned a harsh truth. Underestimate humanity, and you'll learn your own lesson the hard way. The Galactic Council chamber was packed, voices rising like storms colliding. Delegates from 100 worlds debated fiercely over humanity's rising influence, some with hope, others with fear. But all eyes were on the man who started it. All Cole. The human cadet, still fresh from Crucible's brutal arena, stood tall despite the weight pressing down on his shoulders. The fight was over, but the battle for respect had just begun. Varric sat across the chamber, his massive frame rigid, but his eyes steady. The Dravic warrior who once sought to crush Cole now bore the scars of respect, physical and mental. Humans fight not just with strength, Varric said, voice deep and resonant. They fight with mind, with honor. They teach us that power is hollow without discipline and understanding. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Outside, across the stars, ships of human design glided through space with new purpose. Humans weren't just surviving. They were reshaping alliances, rewriting strategies, demanding their place among the great powers. The galaxy's old prejudices crumbled in the face of undeniable truth. Back in Crucible Station, Cole trained with the new generation of fighters. Their movements were sharper, their resolve unbreakable. Every punch, every parry, every step echoed the lesson he learned and now passed on. Because the fight wasn't about winning a duel. It was about showing the galaxy the strength of humanity's heart and mind. The crowd's roar in the arena still echoed in Cole's memory, not as a sound of victory, but as a promise. That no matter the enemy, no matter the odds, humanity would rise. And so the galaxy learned the final lesson. To challenge humanity was to invite defeat. Not because they were the strongest, but because they never stopped learning, never stopped fighting, and never forgot the cost of underestimation.